Now, you guys, last year, you should have already learned how to add and subtract decimals, so we're going to go kind of quick because this is mainly just a review. I just want it to be in your journal so that you have it as a reference. Okay, so both of these should already be put in there, adding and subtracting. So we're going to have these to refer to throughout the school year if you need it. Okay. All right, looking at the very first one, it's adding decimals to the thousandths. I'm given a table, and it says Bob's hamster run. How far did Bob's hamster run in the maze on the odd numbered days? That's what I'm trying to figure out. So I'm looking at my odd numbered days. That's 1, 3, and 5. Okay, so I'm looking at this number, and this number. That is how I'm going, wait, hold on. Okay, we'll come back and solve that because we're going to look at this example. I thought these examples matched up, but we're going to look at the example first, then we'll come back and answer this question once we see how to add decimals. Okay, the first thing, most important thing, is that you need to line up the decimal points. Okay, so anytime you are working with decimals, adding or subtracting, that's important. Only adding and subtracting, you need to line up your decimals. For whole numbers, if you don't have a decimal, where do you put that decimal point? Because you got to have one. It goes right after the whole number, right? And then step 3, we're going to add in my 0 of the heroes. So I'm going to plug in zeros to line up under the other digits so that everything stays perfectly lined up. Okay, now I'm going to add my digits together. So step 4, I add it all together. And you add like normal. So starting in your furthest to the right place value, which in this case is the thousandths place, I have 2 thousandths, I have 8 hundredths, I have 9 tenths, and then add your wholes together, and that makes 20. Okay, step 5, bring the decimal point straight down. Notice how I put that decimal point. I started in my thousandths, then my hundredths, then my tenths. I added the decimal point straight down. Then I added my ones column, okay? Once you bring it straight down, the last step is just check it. Make sure you did it right. How could I check this? I could take,
20.982 minus 5.000, then minus the answer minus 9.800.
and then I should end up with the first one. So I can work backwards. I can take my answer, subtract 5, then subtract 9.8. I could add 2 of these together and subtract that from my answer, and I should end back up with one of the numbers. There's multiple ways to check it, okay? All right, looking back at the problem that we just looked at with Bob's hamster run, okay? How far did Bob's hamster run in the maze on the odd numbered days? So I'm going to be looking at this number, and this number. Okay, first thing I want to do is make sure that I line up the decimal points when I write my numbers down. So I have 2 and 605 thousandths plus 1 and 566 thousandths plus 1 and 656 thousandths. So once everything's in line, then it's just a matter of adding like you normally would. So starting with your furthest place value, that's going to be thousandths. What's my thousandths column going to add up to? 17, carry that 1. My hundredths column will add up to 12 because I got to add the 1 that I carried over and then carry that 1. My tenths column, what's that going to add up to? 18 and carry another 1. And what's my ones column going to add up to? 5. And then the most important thing I need to remember is to bring down this decimal point. So my answer is 5 and 827 thousandths. And then you can go ahead and try the next one about Jenny. It says, Jenny used the scale in science class to measure the mass of iron fillings. 3 samples were 1 and 237 thousandths grams, 2 and 394 thousandths grams, and 700 grams. How many total grams did she measure? So go ahead and try that on your own. Plug in zero the hero where needed, and then we'll check it together. If I were just solving this problem like on a regular work page, in order to figure out that I'm adding, there's a key word there, how many total grams, that tells me that I'm adding. So if it's ever mixed up or something, make sure you're looking for those keywords. But when we go back and we check it, you're gonna line up all your decimal points. There's 1 0 the hero that I needed to add in. It's blue, so it stands out. And then I just add like normal. And you should have ended up with 3 and 701 grams. How do we feel on adding? Good? Okay, let's move on to subtracting. For subtracting, our steps are almost the exact same. Look at the problems. I got how much longer did Bob's hamster run on day 1 than day 4? So we're going to come back to that in a minute. But we're going to start out with the example given to us right here. 25 minus 17 and 63 thousandths. First thing I want to do is line up my decimal points. So I'm going to do 25. It tells me in step 2, for whole numbers, the decimal point goes after the digit in the ones place. Then I got to plug in some zeros. Well, how many zero the heroes do I need? I need 3. I need 3 because the number that I'm subtracting from 25 has 3 decimal places. So I want to make sure that I have the right number so that everything stays lined up perfectly. So this is what it's going to look like. Step 4, after I added in my zero the heroes, step 4 just tells me subtract. So I'm just going to subtract like I normally would. This requires a lot of borrowing and regrouping because I'm subtracting across zeros. So I'm going to go all the way over to the 5. I'm going to borrow from the 5, which leaves me with 4 here. That makes this first 0 10, but I got to borrow from it, so that's actually a 9. To make this a 10, which becomes a 9, so that this can become a 10. Now I can subtract. So 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 minus 6 is 3. 9 minus nothing is 9. 4 minus 7. I can't do that. So borrow from here. That 4 becomes 14. And 14 minus 7 is 7. Okay, most important thing now, drop that decimal straight down into my answer. If I want to check it, there's a couple different ways. Actually, there's only one way. I would just add, this number to this number. And I should end up with what I started with. So when I add it, if I'm writing, you're writing. And I end back up with 25. So I know that it works. Same exact steps. The only difference is whenever you should be adding, now I am subtracting. That's it. Easy peasy. Okay, now let's go back to Bob's hamster run. The key word here is what? How much longer? So it's actually not a word, it's a key phrase. Sometimes it's a whole phrase, sometimes it's just a word. When you see how much longer, how much further, things like that, that means you're subtracting. But I want to focus on day 1 and day 4. So how much longer did he run on day 1 than he did on day 4? So I'm going to take 2 and 605 thousandths, and I'm going to subtract 2 and 55 thousandths. Nothing else is needed here. I don't need zero the hero. Don't need to do anything special. Just got to make sure my decimals are lined up and then subtract. With a little bit of borrowing and regrouping, my answer should be 0 and 550 thousandths. How are we feeling so far? Okay, go ahead and solve the problem about Melissa and Melanie, and then we'll check it together. Make sure you label your answers, and here we are. How much farther means we're subtracting? 2 2 and 891 thousandths minus 1 and 962 thousandths gives you 929 thousandths miles. Okay, we're about to do a Plicker's review.